The applications that we have filed today are laser focused on one charge, really, in relation to the individuals. It's the crime against humanity of gender persecution, contrary to Article 71H of the Rome Statute. We say that the overwhelming evidence that we've seen, so much of it is in the public domain, so much of it is clearly it is known to Afghan girls and women who live under those pernicious circumstances, constitute severe deprivations of fundamental human rights contrary to international law. This isn't some acceptable choice from a menu of options that states can choose from. This isn't about religious autonomy of doctrinal beliefs of Christianity or Islam or Buddhism or anything else for that matter. This has crossed every threshold in which women can neither be seen nor heard. Women can't go to university. Girls don't have an opportunity to go to school above class 6. Champions of education, including men, who believe that their daughters, girls in general, should have an opportunity to be armed with enlightenment.
Obviously, Afghanistan used to be a signatory to the ICC. I don't think the Taliban would recognize the court and therefore would probably ignore this arrest warrant that you're seeking. Is there any mechanism, though, to enforce this? Because the sorts of countries that perhaps these Taliban leaders would be traveling to, say Pakistan, they too are not a signatory of this court.
Well, it's a great question. The Taliban have been in power for a while. As a matter of international law, they have not withdrawn from the Rome Statute. They have international law obligations. The issue of enforcement is another matter. Our job is to look at the evidence. We have jurisdiction. The international law obligations are clear. And I think it's important for us not only to apply the law, but to realize that there are millions of girls and women and also men in Afghanistan that want equality, that want to be able to have hope, that want to be able to have dreams. And if we don't apply the law equally, it makes things even worse because they are seen by us today. They will be seen by the judges of the International Criminal Court, and hopefully their voices and their dreams will be heard.
What is your message then to those member states?
Firstly, fulfill international obligations. We are in it's a stormy season. I can see you well wrapped up in Washington, D.C. It's quite overcast here in The Hague as well, and internationally, we are waiting for the green shoots of spring. And what it requires us to get through to that springtime, where we can see the daffodils and the tulips in Holland, is for states to protect what they say they value, which is the right of every individual to autonomy, to choice. How is it right that a woman is forced, not as a matter of choice, that simply because she's 20 years of age, she's forced to get married? How is it right that a widow under 35 is compelled at a time of somebody else's choosing, a decree to get remarried, as opposed to when she wishes to get married again if she does, or at the time when she feels emotionally able to have that connection to get married? These are matters that cannot be imposed. A straitjacket cannot be imposed under the rubric of any ideology, and cumulatively it is so profound that it has crossed, we say, all the thresholds of international law and amounts to gender persecution as a crime against humanity detailed in the statute. So I hope people live up. Words are cheap. This is the time around the world, in Afghanistan and in other situations, where people are looking at the gap between the promise of a rules-based system, the promise of international law, and the reality where far too often international law is a transactional commodity that can be airbrushed out when it's inconvenient, and it can be force-fed when it aligns with national interest. And that current playbook is leading the world to more war, more conflict, less harmony. And I think we need people to have the wisdom, state parties first and foremost, but also other states, to realize that the law is not their enemy. The law is part of the architecture, along with education, along with empowerment, along with healthcare, to allow us to live together in harmony, or at least less conflict.
You just mentioned me being here in Washington, D.C. Of course, over the last few days, we saw Donald Trump inaugurated. I want to turn your attention now to another issue of importance here in the United States. And I want to talk about those arrest warrants that were issued by the court to the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, and the former Defense Minister, Yoav Gallant. The House of Representatives here have voted to sanction the ICC. The Senate is likely to do the same thing. Just your reaction to that?
And of course, the judges of the International Criminal Court also issued a warrant in relation to the Hamas individual Daif. In terms of the options of sovereign states, states have responsibilities to decide what is ethical, what is consistent with the national values, and what is consistent with what they've been saying in other situations. And I always hope, I have great respect for the United States of America and the better angels of ourselves, the best part of the United States, from Jackson, from the Constitution, Jackson, the chief prosecutor of Nuremberg, is a country where individuals have rights and the law must play its part, and we don't sanction judges who are trying to apply the law or staff members who are serving the cause of humanity to the best of their abilities. It really, there are real problem actors out there in terms of terrorists, in terms of people committing massive crimes, and I hope common sense prevails.
Well, you've said that you hope that judges aren't sanctioned, but just this week, President Trump signed executive orders allowing for that to happen in the future, including sanctions that you could potentially face. How do you react to that and the possibility of sanctions on you?
Well, the way I look at it is this: prosecutors come and go. We're ships that pass in the night. Judges have terms, they come and go. The important thing to remember is that this court and the building that your viewers see behind me was created because there was a realization after Nuremberg and a realization today that humanity and science can take us to the stars, but we can also destroy ourselves. And so there's a fundamental choice. Are we trying to be constrained by something? And I think in terms of the best of the United States, I hope common sense and principle prevails.
I mean, the United States would argue that this issue around Israel is beyond your mandate. That is what they're saying. I just want you to respond to that, because their concern is you go after Israel today, could you go after US troops tomorrow? And they're talking specifically about jurisdiction when it comes to this.
Yes, we don't go after anybody. We follow the law. We have, and the judges of the ICC decided before I was elected, that we had jurisdiction in the Palestine state case. Those states accepted Palestine as a state party. This is the first point. Secondly, even the United States accepted, and many of them applauded, the exercise of jurisdiction in the Ukraine situation, even though warrants were issued by the judges of the ICC in relation to the head of state of a non-state party, indeed a permanent member of the Security Council, namely President Putin and Madam Lvova-Belova. And we have to simply follow the law. The law says, under the Rome Statute, we have jurisdiction. There's always the options of complementarity. They have not been taken in the case of Israel. We are here as a court of last resort. And is one really seriously arguing that the hostages in Israel have no recourse when they're being held in Palestine? Or is somebody seriously arguing that a baby in Gaza or hospitals in Gaza are undeserving of protection under the Geneva Conventions? We're not in the Wild West. We're not in the Wild West. We're in a world, at least, that says we are governed by the rule of law.
Are you concerned then when states like France, for example, say, well, this doesn't apply to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu?
Well, states ultimately have an obligation to apply the law, and there's a difference between what the executive says and what the judges of different national jurisdictions say are the legal requirements under international law, including under national law, that implements international obligations. So I think one needs to have a very calm approach. We have our judges at the International Criminal Court, including French judges. There are French judges in France, of course, and let's see what the judges of those national courts and also of the International Criminal Court say. So far, they've spoken very clearly. We have jurisdiction. The evidence exists in terms of the issuance of warrants. There are international obligations. And then it's for states to decide to apply their law or to make the arguments that they want. And we have judges here who can decide those arguments. And as a lawyer, that's my best advice always. If you have an argument, if you say there's no jurisdiction, argue before the court. Israel has filed applications before the International Criminal Court. Any state may put forward submissions, and they have. And let's follow the rule of law and accept the outcome.
I don't want to labour this point too much, but just on Donald Trump, issuing this executive order to sanction the court, are you concerned, though, that this sets a sort of precedence and this could impact the future of the court and the future existence of the court?
Well, what President Trump actually has done so far is simply revoke the President Biden's executive order, which revoked President Trump's earlier imposition of sanctions on the International Criminal Court. We'll have to wait and see if another executive order is signed or if there are other bills passed by Congress, and see what the contours of those laws are. And we must respond, accordingly. But we're servants. We endeavour to be, the judges, my staff, servants of something bigger than ourselves, which is the rule of law. And there are big powers out there that have their responsibilities to do what they think is right, not only what is expedient.
Are you worried about this accusation that the court has been weaponized or politicized?
Well, I think it's bunkum. If you look of the history of the ICC, it was accused of being focused a lot on Africa. We have investigations in Venezuela. We have investigations in Ukraine and warrants in Ukraine. We have, of course, Palestine and Israel. We have Georgia. We have, of course, Sudan and Libya. Look at the Philippines. Myanmar, we applied in terms of Myanmar, Bangladesh for warrants today in Afghanistan. I don't think it's been a weaponization. I think it's trying to apply the law equally, realizing whatever one's color of one's skin, whatever one's passport, whichever continent of the world one lives in, certain conduct, namely genocide, war crimes, or crimes against humanity, cannot be condoned. They constitute breaches of the Geneva Convention. They constitute breaches of customary international law, and they constitute breaches of the Rome Statute. And one can't close one's eyes to the evidence simply because the application, the fair and equal application of the law, may make one unpopular or a target because of the friendships or alliances of some powerful beasts in the jungle. And in fact, that type of approach is anathema to the equal application of the law. This is why Lady Justice is blind. That's the aspiration, that the law is applied equally. We're not living in a perfect world. I'm not naive, but we're trying to apply the law in an effective, in a fair manner, notwithstanding the consequences that may be threatened. And I think the victims
Mr. Khan,
expect this of us.
Mr. Khan, I have to ask you about something closer to the home. You face sexual misconduct allegations. I know that there is currently an external investigation, but can I just ask you to respond to those allegations? Because there are some who believe that perhaps you should be stepping down from your position because this investigation is a distraction to all of the things that you've discussed with me today and the work of the court.
Well, I called for the investigation, in fact, and I'm not able to comment further. I've given statements in relation to that. There's an order and an injunction by the President of the Assembly of State Parties. This is a process. I call for an investigation, and really I've got nothing more to add at all on the topic. And, I think that's where I must leave it.
Just briefly, Mr. Khan, I know we've gone over time, but just on Syria, I know you recently were there to meet the de facto leader. Is the court currently looking at holding the previous regime accountable?
We have no jurisdiction as things stand in Syria. We are well aware of the very serious accusations over quite a period of time in relation to Syria. But it was important, I think, to go and to speak to the transitional government, to underline the fact that options existed to build partnerships, to try to improve accountability, to narrow the impunity gap. And we discussed those options, and I think a team will be going back to Damascus in the next short while. The people of Syria have suffered enormously. We're willing to help. We're willing to play our part if we have jurisdiction. If we don't, we can't.